Hey, this is Ish, and I recently just completed a 10-day meditation retreat, which was online. And I want to talk to you a bit more about my experiences and how the retreat was structured, as well as some pros and cons, so you can decide for yourself whether an online meditation retreat would be a good fit for you. So, the online retreat that I took was on mastering the jhanas, and jhanas are essentially just meditative states of absorption in which your mind is super concentrated, and there are various levels of jhanas. So, you have four jhanas, which are material jhanas, and then you have four immaterial jhanas, which are formless, and each state of jhana gets even more concentrated as you go up. And this was a topic that I was very interested in, and I had originally saw this retreat online, and it was actually set to be in person, but for whatever reason, the circumstances changed, and it switched to being online. So this was new to me and very interesting because I've never done an online retreat before. I'm very used to going in person for a retreat and actually sitting there in a meditation hall. So this was a new experience for me, and I wanted to check it out anyways because the teacher was really reputable and really proficient at what he does. The teacher, by the way, is Lee Brasington, and I was studying under him for learning the jhanas. And I wanted to say that this retreat that I took was pretty well organized, so it may vary between retreats if you're looking into different options, because some may be completely unstructured while some are a bit more structured in a sense. So with this schedule, it was pretty predictable. So in the morning, we would have a Dharma talk or instructions where you'd learn various techniques from Lee, or he'd be reciting the suttas, and this is just the Buddha's teachings, on different pointers or instructions on different guidelines to follow. So this is very informative. And in the context of time, this morning talk started around 10:30 a.m. my time. So it started then and it lasted for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So around 12 p.m. Would be when we were supposed to meditate, or you could get lunch if you wanted to. And then we'd have another meeting at 7 p.m. my time. So you have this gap in between your day. And every third day, you would have a one-on-one with the teacher. So this would be with Lee. And this is where I could ask him any questions that I had, or anything that I need to improve on, or any pointers, and really talk about anything related to my practice or how it relates to outside my practice as well, or any questions just about what we're learning. And typically most online retreats will have some sort of one-on-one with the teacher. And I would say if you are looking into online retreats and they don't have a one-on-one, I would recommend steering clear from that, because it is very important to have a teacher there and they're able to guide you. Because if you didn't have that feature of having a one-on-one with the teacher, then you might as well just take an online course or do something different. So the purpose behind a retreat is to deepen your practice, and there's no better way to do so by studying with the teacher and working with them to help clarify any things that you have with your practice or anything you're doing wrong. They'll be able to clarify, whereas a course or an online learning thing won't actually help you with. So that's just a key distinction to keep in mind. And just before we go into the pros and cons, I just wanted to say that the retreat that I took was very informative, and I have really good reviews about it because it was well organized, and the teacher that I was studying under was very knowledgeable and was able to help me out a lot. So I felt that within this 10-day time frame, even though it really isn't a long time in comparison to other retreats, it was very helpful for me and I grew a lot. So that's just my personal opinion, but I wanted to go over now the pros and cons of an online retreat. So the first is that online retreats, you have access to all kinds of teachers that you want, because you're not confined to your location. So I live here in Austin. If I was only looking for places in my area, I would only be confined with a 1 hour radius, or maybe even 2 hours if I'm willing to take the drive. But that limits my teacher pool that I can study under. But in an online retreat, it is online, so there is no restriction in that aspect. Sure, if you can even study with someone who is in a different country, but then you have to deal with the time zone there, but it is certainly possible. So that's wonderful that you can study under any teacher, any lineage, any particular style that you're interested in. And if you don't happen to live in a big city, what an online retreat can do is that it allows for you to study under a style that you wouldn't normally have access to locally. The second big advantage of having an online meditation retreat is that it's considerably cheaper than going to a retreat in person. Because typically, if you are going to a place for a retreat and it is longer, so say it's 2 weeks or so, you would also need to pay for lodging, and that'll obviously cost you, hundreds to even thousands of dollars. So these expenses add up. You'd also have to pay for meals. You can't eat from your house, obviously, because you're traveling, and you'll have all these other expenses and things that are involved with boarding, accommodation, and the things that will go with actually practicing in the studio. With an online retreat, that's not the case because it is all virtual, so there's no extra added cost on top of that. So you'll find that the online retreats are a lot cheaper than the pricier options of flying out or driving out to a place and incurring all these additional expenses such as gas, food, accommodation, transportation, and all these other factors that you probably didn't really think about. The next great advantage of having an online retreat is that it is very flexible to your particular schedule. So although I may be single and have a very easy job, a lot of people might have kids that they're looking after, or families, or different responsibilities outside their work. So they may be unable to really take that time for themselves to just drop everything and just go stay at some kind of monastery or a meditation hall hours away. So an online retreat allows for you to work with whatever schedule that you have. So like I was mentioning, in the retreat that I took, I had a morning meeting, which was like around 10:30, that lasted until like around 12, and then I had an evening one, which was around 7 p.m. But in between those times, I had those free times. So if I wanted to go for a walk at 2 p.m., I could. If I did have any pets or anything like that, I could take them out or whatever the case is throughout the day. Whereas I couldn't have if I was in a retreat in person. Because the in-person retreats are very regimented and scheduled. So for example, if you go to a Zen meditation retreat, they might have you wake up at 5 a.m. every single day, and exactly at 7 a.m. you'll go for a walk for 20 minutes, and then you'll come back, meditate, then you'll have breakfast exactly at 10 a.m. So it is very structured every single day. Not so for an online meditation retreat, because as I mentioned, there is some flexibility. Sure, you may have some one-on-ones with your teacher or some instructional meetings, but other than that, you have the whole day for yourself to schedule your meditation. Another thing I found very valuable about an online retreat is that it gave me the confidence to deepen my home practice. And the reason why is that you are in your house most likely if you are doing an online meditation retreat. So you are gaining the confidence and the skills that you basically prove to your brain that you can do this. Because in a meditation retreat, you're probably meditating upwards of 6 to 8 hours. So that is considerably long time, right? So it'll actually prove to your brain that you can do it. So the next time you're at your apartment and you're trying to meditate and you can barely do an hour or 2 hours, you have the confidence because you know that you've done 6 hours in your place. So you know that it is possible, obviously. And there may be some kind of disconnect when you're in a meditation hall, like in person, because you're in a separate little bubble where you're with other meditators and monks, and it's I wouldn't say artificial is not the right word, but you're in a different environment. And it may seem like a disconnect when you actually come back to your house and go about your activities, because it just seems like it was a nice little vacation and now you're back to the world, so you're unable to replicate that same amount of hours put in. Well, if you train yourself to meditate in your place and you've done this retreat, you can prove to yourself that you're able to meditate for that long. And another pro of being in an online meditation retreat is that you just have the essentials in place, and you do skip the more of the fluff that happens in a in-person meditation retreat. So for example, in a in-person meditation retreat, you might have to wait for everyone to be served before eating, or you might have to do some chanting that you probably have no idea what it's all about, or maybe you don't have any interest in chanting, but you kind of have to do it anyways because you're there in person. Well, in an online retreat, you're just doing whatever is essential for you. So you're just meditating or going for meditation walks and eating, and you can do that on your own time. So you don't have any added on things that aren't really required because you're in an online retreat. So you don't have that in place. And if you're in an in-person meditation retreat, they might have you do things like rake the leaves outside, or wash everyone else's dishes or something like that. But if you're at home, you'll just wash your own dishes. So you're just sticking to just meditating and just the essentials in a sense. The next thing is, this is more of a personal thing, but I typically found that it is easier to ask questions in a online retreat on Zoom as opposed to being in a meditation hall where it may be a bit harder for you to do so. And the reason why is that in both online meditation retreats and in person, you do take a vow of silence, like a noble silence. So there is the added pressure of speaking up in a room where everyone else is silent in person. And the second thing is that you may also feel uncomfortable asking a question out loud in front of everyone else. So for people that are maybe a bit more shy or just don't feel as confident, just speaking out loud and just saying what they want, an online retreat is perfect because you can use that feature on Zoom if you're using that, where you can raise your hand and the teacher can call upon you rather than just wave your hand in person and hopefully that teacher will see you and then you have to speak up. So it may be a bit more nerve-wracking in person to ask questions or anything in general about your practice, whether it's a bit easy, whereas it's a bit more easier in an online retreat. And the last great advantage I like to say about online retreats is that you can really see how the improvements will affect your daily life. So as I mentioned earlier, there seems to be some kind of disconnect between being in your room and meditating here compared to in an in-person retreat in a monastery or meditation hall, where it just seems like it's a different world altogether. And now when you come back, you tend to lose that. So when you are in your own house, in the comfort of your own house, and you're meditating, you can clearly see how the practice benefits you because you're encountered with the same triggers over again. And you can see how you can overcome it. So if you normally have a loud neighbor that walks past your door every day at like 5 p.m., normally where you would have gotten triggered or annoyed, now you wouldn't because you've encountered that every single day over the course of your meditation, and now it just doesn't bother you anymore. Or if you go out for a walk and you hear some loud cars, whether if it was before, you might have gotten distracted or gotten annoyed, but now you've done a couple hours every day, you're kind of peaceful, and now when you go for the same walk as you've done every single day before, it just doesn't affect you anymore. So you can clearly see how the practice affects you for the better by going back to the same triggers or the same situations that you normally do and approaching it with a new pair of eyes. So now that I've gone over the pros, I wanted to go over the potential cons of an online meditation retreat. And do note that I do say potential cons because it's really up to you and your self-discipline that you have in play, because that is what is most important here in terms of the cons and whether you will fall into distractions or any other negative things during an online retreat. So obviously the main thing for online retreats is that it does rely on your discipline and your self-discipline. So it's very easy to pick up your phone next to you and check your phone or look at emails, or say that you're going to put your phone off and then end up putting it back on, because there's nothing to stop you really from doing that at home. Because in an in-person retreat, you can't really just pull out your phone in the middle of meditation, or if you're just not going to do that, or check your emails, during meditation. That's really not going to happen. But if you are doing an online meditation retreat, you can simply just turn your shoulder over, pick up your phone, or check your emails. So the distractions are always there. And even if you say that you will turn off your phone, you might end up doing it anyways. So this is why you do want to be very disciplined in that sense and actually make sure that you aren't exposed to any distractions, and you need to have a good sense of discipline in order to do that. So you do want to keep the retreat mindset, because it is a retreat, not to check your phone or look at emails or talk to other people, just make idle gossip that'll actually mess up your meditation. So you do want to be very serious and mindful in that regard. And in terms of the structure, since it is an online retreat and it is less structured than an in-person retreat, you do want to be on top of things to make sure that you are, in fact, getting enough meditation in the day. Because as I mentioned, my first meeting was at 10:30, and it was very easy for me to just sleep in until like 10 a.m. and then start the morning meeting. Whereas that time could have been used for meditation during the mornings. And in an in-person retreat, there's no avoiding it. You kind of have to be there, so you can't just sleep in or just do other things, because you have to be there in person. So you do also want to make sure that you're very diligent about your time and make sure that you are very structured and actually meditating like you said you were going to do, rather than doing other things like sleeping or walking around or just not doing what you're supposed to do. So it is important to be very mindful of your time. And one thing that you typically find in an in-person retreat is that you do have an element of social pressure, and many people think it's a bad thing, but in this context, it's actually pretty good, because when you have people sitting next to you in a meditation room, that will encourage you not to move around or wiggle because you're distracting them. You don't want to do that. So that'll encourage you to sit a bit more or longer than you thought you were going to do, simply due to the fact that there are people watching you, there's monks behind you, meditators next to you. So that'll encourage you to sit a bit longer. Now, one way to replicate that is to have your video on in an online meditation retreat. So when you have your video on, you do have that social pressure in, because you know that at any point maybe someone could be looking at your screen, although they probably won't, but that added pressure might help you stay in place and sit for longer periods rather than give up and go for a walk or do something else. So there's something to keep in mind. The next potential con is that if you do have bad internet or just any kind of technical difficulties, yeah, that may be unfortunate, because there was about 2 or 3 participants that had video errors or audio difficulties, and as a result we weren't able to see them, or we weren't able to hear them sometimes. I know there was also some awkward situations where someone was trying to talk over the other and they couldn't hear the other person. So just make sure that if you are doing this, that your internet is well set up and everything's working on the technical side, so you don't run into these difficulties. And one thing to avoid in your retreat, which I talked about earlier, is if your online meditation retreat doesn't do one-on-ones, I would look for other options, just because it is immensely valuable to have a teacher talk to you one-on-one to help you out. And this is something that's done quite often in an in-person retreat, because you can simply just go up to the teacher or schedule time with them. But if your online retreat just doesn't have this feature, then that's something you probably want to steer away from. Now, the next potential con is the lack of structure in place means that you may not know what to focus on as well. So if a teacher gives you a couple different techniques, well, now you have just a bunch of options, and now you're overthinking things or considering different options during your meditation, and now your mind is getting even more distracted. So you can see where I'm going with this. So it is important that you do simplify your options and you create that structure for yourself, so you know where you're going, what you're doing, rather than entertaining a lot of different options and a lot of different teachings and getting confused and lost in the mix. So for example, if a teacher taught you focus on the breath, and that's your particular meditation, well, do that for a bit, and then maybe do another technique, such as a body scan technique, or doing a contemplation of the elements. That's another contemplation technique. So do that instead of thinking, oh, my teacher taught me body scan, they taught me loving kindness, they taught me meditation of the breath, they taught me hearing meditation. Which one should I do? I'm not sure. Maybe I should switch to this and then go to this one afterwards after 10 minutes. So you don't want to confuse yourself. So keep it very simple. Stick to 1 or 2 exercises per sit, so you don't get distracted and your mind doesn't wander as well. So I hope you liked this talk and hope you found this helpful. I definitely recommend online meditation retreats, especially if you have some kind of practice and you're established in your practice, so you're able to have that discipline in place, so you can sit for longer. So I do recommend that you've done some kind of in-person retreat before, so this way you have the discipline to carry over, because I can definitely imagine an online meditation retreat being a bit challenging for brand new beginners, simply because they don't have the discipline in place to keep that going for long periods of time. But yeah, if you're used to meditating for say 8 hours in person, well, then meditating in a retreat setting online may be a bit easier, because you have that skills to bring forth and you can stay disciplined. And also, online meditation retreats are amazing if you just have any kind of other responsibilities during your day where you can't simply just get up and go and leave your other responsibilities behind for the time being. So, if you're a parent and you can't just leave, you don't have anyone babysit your kids or other responsibilities, online meditation retreats are perfect, because this way you can still have your life. It may be not as involved, but you still have your life there, and you can also dedicate that time for yourself for an online meditation retreat as well. So again, hope you found this helpful, and let me know if you'd like similar talks like this in the future. Thank you.